Hello YouTube, it's David with the very first episode of That's Fucked Up, a new video podcast discussing horror and cult media, whether that be movies, TV shows, video games, comics, novels, merchandise, news, pretty much anything that takes my fancy. Now, just to be clear, when I say news, this is not a news show in any way, so don't ask why I didn't mention certain things that may or may not be in the news. It's just more if I feel like mentioning something, then I'll mention it. If it's something that truly excites me, for example an upcoming movie, a sequel to a movie I really enjoy, a movie getting released on Blu-ray that hasn't been released for a long time, stuff like that, then I might talk about it. Otherwise, this is just a topical show. I pick the topics, mostly things that I watched, read or played during the week, and then I convey what I thought back to you all. Without further ado, let's get spooky. Okay, so we'll start at the beginning with something that isn't really horror, but does definitely fit in that cult, dark aesthetic, and of course I'm talking about Heathers, the original 1988 movie. Absolutely classic movie, just Winona Ryder, Christian Slater, fantastic cast in this movie. It's a really dark movie. If you don't know what Heathers is about, if you've been living under a rock your entire life, essentially it's about this young woman named Veronica. She's very, very popular at school. She's friends with the most popular girls in school, known as the Heathers, because all three of them are called Heather. She meets this new boy named JD, who's kind of like a rebel, kind of like bad boy kind of vibe. He and her try to play a little prank on one of the Heathers after she acts a little bit bitchy at a party. One thing leads to another, Heather ends up dead. Now luckily Veronica is really good at forging people's handwriting, that's pretty much what she's known for at school, so they end up devising the idea to frame it as a suicide. Unfortunately, instead of it just being this one incident, the school absolutely glorify Heather as an amazing person who was just misunderstood and was really a good person. And of course it kind of pisses off Veronica because she knows this isn't true, and it really pisses off JD to the point that there ends up being a few more murders, and the movie ends in a very, shall we say, explosive manner. Now this movie is hilarious. You may think a movie that deals with teen suicide and murder and all the sort of emotions might just be drab and dull and really depressing, and it does definitely go into that, but really it is a dark comedy. It's a play on all of the other teen comedies from the 80s, mainly the John Hughes movies, basically saying no, these people weren't misunderstood, these people are just assholes, sometimes people are just dicks. And that's just the fact of life, and that's what this movie talks about. Again, the casting is absolutely fantastic. There is a musical based on this as well, which I might talk about another time. But for now, the movie is absolutely fantastic. If you haven't seen Heathers, definitely seek it out. It's easily available on Blu-ray. I believe you can stream it on Amazon Prime. It's also in the Last Drive-In with Joe Bob Briggs on Shudder if you have the Shudder app. Which, by the way, just for all you horror people out there, if you don't have Shudder, I highly recommend it. It's only £5 a month. You get so much horror, you get so many cult movies, cult classics, original series. In fact, one I'm going to talk about a little bit later is on here. Just fantastic value for money, especially with The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob Briggs. Fantastic series. But yeah, just an absolutely fantastic movie. Again, as I said, this is a really off-the-cuff kind of discussion. This is kind of the format of this show. But overall, Heathers, if you haven't checked it out, if you like dark comedy, definitely check it out. I think you'll have a good time. Next up, we have Maniac Cop, starring quite a few people. The main one that pretty much everyone will recognise, of course, being Bruce Campbell, who said this is the worst movie he has ever done, which is actually pretty funny compared to some of the other movies he would later go on to do. Oh, plus the fact that mentioning Heathers earlier, a long time ago. I'm not sure if it's true anymore, but Winona Ryder did say it's the best movie she ever done. So it's pretty interesting to see Bruce Campbell say this is the worst movie he ever done. Now, Maniac Cop is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's set in New York in the 80s. There's a 7-foot ass killer cop on the loose. A main character gets framed for the murders, tries to prove it's not him, and the movie pretty much goes from there. Now, I had been led to believe this was a straight horror, and it is technically a horror movie. I mean, it's horrific, especially given real world situations that are happening right now, especially in the UK and then back in 2020 with police officers. It is definitely a movie that hits at home, but this is less of a straight horror and almost felt a bit like Terminator, except the characters are being chased by a killer cop instead of like a killer T-1000, if you get my drift. Really interesting film. Some of the shots are really well done. I do like some of the deaths. The actual movie overall drags on a little bit for me personally. Again, a lot of people are probably going to disagree with me on this. I know a lot of people love this movie. I feel it just really drags on. It's a really like slow movie, and I love slow movies. I like long movies, but this is the wrong type of slow. This is the type of movie that just takes too long to get where it's going, or even give you any inkling of where it's going to go. And the ending is just over the top and not in a fun way. It's just really actiony and really generic. This movie isn't a bad movie by any means, but it's also not a great movie. I don't do ratings, as you all know, but if I was to do ratings, I'd probably give this 3 out of 5. Not a terrible movie by any means, but not something I ever see myself going back to. I might check out the sequels, maybe not, maybe not. I say this all the time, then I end up never doing it. In fact, it will probably say on my grave, David, he never watched insert movie here, because the amount of times I say I'm going to watch a movie, and then I just don't, because, well, frankly, my mind just goes all over the place, and I kind of have ADHD, so I just go to whatever interests me, really. Overall, rambling aside, Maniac Cop, pretty average. We'll get back to movies in a moment, but very quickly we're going to have a little sidetrack with a TV series and a book. Now, as far as the book, I have not finished it yet. I'm about 14 chapters in just now. It is a book called Enter Night by Michael Rowe. Really good vampire novel. Not gotten super heavily into the vampire stuff just yet. It is a very slow burn from what I can tell. But the drama is there. All of the characters are really interesting. Building up the mythos of the town. Building up the backstory of the main vampire. Really good book. I'll get back to you all on this when I actually finish it. But for now, I have to say, pretty damn good. Really enjoying it. As far as TV series here, we're going to talk about 2. First of all, just very briefly, I watched the first episode of Creepshow. Really fun, really enjoyed it, watched it with one of my friends. Pretty fun. The first story was based on a Stephen King short story, which is always good. And I liked his second story about the dollhouse. Bit weird, but really creative and really well shot. Now, what I actually want to talk about, you can probably see in the title, is Scream the series, specifically season 1. Now, I initially watched the show back in 2015 when it first came out, and I really enjoyed it. But when I went back to watch it again, I have forgotten a lot of things. I still remembered who the killer was, I still remembered who that was, but I pretty much remembered nothing else, so it was interesting going back to watch this. The reason I'm going back to watch it is because I want to watch season 2 and then season 3, which isn't connected to season 1 or 2 at all, but has the original movie mask. Anyway, rambling aside, which I tend to do a lot, of course. Season 1, young girl named Emma, a lot of her friends getting killed, Heart being sent in the mail to her mum. We find out there was a young boy named Brandon James who had a deformity. He was killed by the police. There is someone either trying to impersonate him or wants revenge for what happened to him. It's a very interesting story. It's 10 episodes long. It was initially on MTV, so you're going to have some like teen romance and stuff, which I personally don't mind. I'm someone who does like teen romance and teen drama BS. I watch Riverdale every week, despite how insane that show is. So I definitely don't mind it. But I know for a lot of horror fans and a lot of people, you might actually care about that. So be warned, there is some stuff like that. But it actually makes sense. You can't just have death after death after death. That wouldn't be fun. That would be incredibly boring. And let's say as far as the deaths, oh boy, these deaths are really good. I'm not really going to spoil any of them, but let's say something with some farming equipment and also someone's guts pouring out. Yeah, this show doesn't hold back as far as the gore, as far as the deaths. It's very in your face, it's very shocking, it is very well handled, and it's just fucking cool. I really enjoyed the show. Yeah, the ending of the first season with like who the killer is and oh, how could they be there when they're there? Like, is a bit convoluted for sure, but that isn't necessarily a bad thing. I still really enjoyed it. I cannot wait to watch season 2, which will probably be tomorrow at this point, because honestly, despite what a lot of people might say, I really enjoyed this show. Next up, we have the Legend of Boggy Creek from 1972. Specifically, I watched the Last Drive-In version with Joe Bob Briggs. Absolutely terrible, terrible, terrible movie, but I had such a blast with it. Basically, it's like a Yeti, Bigfoot type movie. It's really it's really interesting because essentially, as well as like shooting like scenes like specifically for the movie, the film creators also interview people who claim to have actually seen the monster, and you get voiceover from those people and also them recreating and playing themselves in scenes in the movie, which is really weird. So it's kind of this like pseudo documentary kind of thing, pseudo like early Blair Witch almost, as if it's like a documentary with some dramatic recreations. Really, really interesting, really weird movie. Not gonna lie, a lot of like the accents kind of got on my nerves. Like, just personally, like some of the accents are a bit like, I don't know how to describe it. They're just very American country and not in a good way. But I did definitely enjoy the movie. The few scenes we get with the creature itself are incredibly hokey, but not in a bad way. Well, kind of a bad way, but also just hilarious. I laughed basically, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. This is definitely a movie I want to watch again with some friends, with some beers, because honestly, it's a good time if you're drunk, as Jeremy Johns would say. But yeah, it is a really fun movie. Not a good movie by any means. I would probably suggest, if you're watching it by yourself like I did, that you go ahead and watch the Last Drive-In version with the interludes from Joe Bob Briggs. He also interviews a cryptozoologist, which is pretty fun. I don't know why I said it really, really loud and weird like that. I think I'm channeling my inner Joe Bob Briggs. But yeah, absolutely fantastic in the worst kind of way possible. So much fun, such a blast. Really easy to get through actually. I feel like I probably could have gotten through it even without the Joe Bob parts. But the fact that the Joe Bob parts were there ain't no bad thing at all. And the last thing I want to talk about is Slumber Party Massacre. This is a pretty fun movie. I really enjoyed it. It's pretty by the numbers slasher. A bunch of teenage girls having a slumber party. They've snuck over some booze, some weed, having a good time. Just so happens that an escaped serial killer is on the loose and hunting them down and killing teenagers one by one. No good specific reason given whatsoever as to why this is happening. A lot of the deaths are pretty generic, but you do get a lot of deaths in this movie, and they definitely don't shy away from the blood. If you just want a fun slasher movie that isn't like your main franchise kind of stuff, definitely check this out. Also, I believe written directed by a woman, which is actually pretty rare for horror movies, especially in the 80s. It was actually shocking to me considering there is quite a bit of like female nudity in the movie, at least at the start. which I know some of you perverts are watching. I know that's why some people watch horror movies. I know that's why some of you perverts want to see. I completely understand. So that's there if you want it. Overall, it's been a pretty good week for me as far as horror and cult media. I haven't watched as much as I wanted to or read as much as I wanted to either, just because of life. I've got a lot of personal family stuff going on, which a lot of my friends will of course know, but I definitely did enjoy my week. A lot of fun, some good movies, some terrible movies that I laughed at. Got to tick a few classics or at least popular movies off my list as well. Overall, just had a fantastic week. This is just the first episode. The next couple episodes should hopefully be longer, will evolve as I figured out the format. As I said, this is completely unscripted, not got anything written down whatsoever. This is all off of the top of my head, so if I stutter, if I stop at any point, that's the reason why, essentially, which you've probably noticed and I'm probably doing right now actually. But again, no scripting, that's kind of what's going to happen. But anyway, if you enjoyed this, go ahead and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Links in the description below to my Instagram, my personal Instagram, my Instagram for the show, as well as a Discord server that I have just started based around horror. Pretty much hasn't got anyone in it just yet. So if you want to be a founding member, if you want to be on board straight away, click the link in the description below. Stay respectful, and yeah, thank you for watching. Until next time, stay spooky.